It's all very well saying this is what I'm planning to do. Go out and try and do it. And there's so many examples. And look, you are at the highest level of your sport in the world right at the Olympics. There's, except for world titles, world championships, there's no other competition that's got more pressure. And it's just very difficult to execute a plan when you've got the world watching you, your whole country's behind you. You don't want to look foolish. Imagine if you dived into the water and you wanted to swim a 30-second 50 and the rest of the field swam 24, you're 6 seconds behind. But knowing that, if it's a 1500, you ended up winning by 10 seconds because you swam 15 or 30 50s at, 30 seconds and everybody faded to 36. But at the start, you were literally 40 metres behind. People don't want to put themselves in that position of looking embarrassingly out of kilter. It's the sheep mentality, I suppose. But there's so many examples. And look, in the swimming, we saw that with Ariana Titmus absolutely execute well, where she just let the others, really, blast off and fade, and she came through. And it's interesting how you and I discussed this about how does she know what pace she's swimming as a swimmer. You don't have any feedback, and unless she's got form goggles which will tell her pace in her eyes, which I don't think is legal in the Olympics anyway. I'm not quite sure about that, but
we're asking why aren't athletes wearing them, and the only logical reason would be this: they're illegal, because otherwise it's worth wearing them.
Yes, and you would just be relying on the pace of other swimmers, and that the American girl does swim fast early and fade, so you would just pick her pace and sit off it a bit. But that's putting your trust in another person's pace. Maybe she changed her pace, and swam slower. So that could backfire. So it is interesting that swimmers talk about, having a plan and a tactic, but I'm interested to know what they're basing it on, what feedback they're getting as they're doing it. And going to feel is the obvious thing that they're doing. But with the adrenaline and the excitement of the final of the Olympics, the thing you've trained for 5 years, in the past, Olympic to Olympic, how are you measuring that? Because of course you're tapered, of course everything's going well. You're going to feel, I know in every other sport that we talk about, racing to feel is completely a different result when you actually uncover the data as you're doing it. You think you're holding back, and then you look down at your watch if you're doing an 800, and you're supposed to get to the first 200 in 30 seconds, and you get there in 26, but it felt easy. And so running to feel, is the same as swimming to feel as to riding to feel. What you feel may not absolutely replicate what the data is, and you still could be going too fast. So I'm interested. I love the fact that that's the tactics we were using. It was excellent. But I'm really wondering what it was based on.
Yeah, you're spot on with that point, because there was a great interview with Ariana Titmus's coach, who, by the way, she executed if that was her race plan, she executed it perfectly in both races and came through in the last 50 and won. And he said that in the interview. He said, we had a clear race plan. We knew exactly what she wanted to do every 50, and she executed it under pressure. And like you're saying, you're at the highest level of race possible. You've been building for this race for 4 years, 5 years for these athletes. And she executed it so well. You have to be so cool, calm, and collected to execute like that. But like you're saying, it can't have been that well, because you don't know what pace you're doing. And yes, these athletes train so disciplined that they probably could swim, a 55-second lap with their eyes closed, because they know their pace so well. But once you add in the fact that this is an Olympic final, there's so much adrenaline, there's way more nerves than you could ever replicate in training. Swimmers around you are doing different things. You just can't possibly know for sure. You are more tapered leading into the race. You can't possibly know for sure. And you said this, I don't care how good an athlete you are, you can't possibly know for sure that that's the exact time you're running, because you can't see it, or time you're swimming because you can't see it. So it's a bit of a mixed bag here, because on one hand, it was clearly a well-executed race, but on the other hand, you are racing blind. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, it's spot on, and I'm not really sure about the answer, but at the end of the day, the job was well done. And there is a lot of other examples that we just saw the 800 meter heat for the women. And one of the Moroccan girls was 25 metres off the back after 200 metres. And it looked embarrassingly bad that, how did this girl get into the event? And then she qualified fourth fastest.
The commentators were saying, what is this girl doing? Because they were saying she's a really good runner. How did something happen? Why is she 25 meters off the back? They were absolutely baffled. And we've spoken about this exact scenario. You just mentioned it before, but we've spoken about this exact scenario in running. It's either you run evenly and be 20 meters off the back and look ridiculous, or you just go with the race. And that's most people just turn to go with the race. And in fact, we've never seen this happen on a world stage. And we were both shocked seeing this race happen where this Moroccan girl did this tactic, and then she just, because the girls ended up running 2:00 or 2:01, which is 4 times 30 seconds per 200, and yeah, they all went through in 27. She went through 3 seconds behind, so 20 meters behind, 25 meters behind in 30, and she ran 30, 30, 30, 30, and ran evenly. And we also know, we just came across a recent study that says that the stress response and the lactate response in the body is so much worse when you go out too hard and fade compared to going out evenly. And it's not just about the race itself, it's about how this Moroccan girl is going to feel in her semi-final and final over the next couple of days, and how much of an effort she had to exert in this heat. And it was just an absolutely brilliant example of someone not caring about the ego, not caring about being 25 meters off the back of the race. And then I think she came third in the heat, so it was an automatic qualifier.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, there is an Olympic gold medal in the 800 metre has been won by the American who did exactly that tactic. I think it was 24 years ago, maybe, and he was way off the back. And this is the Olympic 800 final, and he wasn't one of the favourites, and he was way off the back, ran even splits and won. And it's worth looking up that YouTube video to find that the only American to ever have won an 800, I think, at an Olympics. And just that plan of execution. And we talked about championship races compared to running a time trial. I think we'll talk about this later in the program, but certainly, knowing what your ability is, and if you don't have a kick, and the race is really slow, you're not going to qualify in the heats to get to the final. You need to run a time trial so that you can run even splits the whole way around. So to make sure you, in the girls' situation, running a 2-minute 800, if you are not someone who can afford to jog around and then be a part of the finish sprint, then you're not going to qualify no matter how good a runner you are. So understanding your own ability is kind of key to your race plan. And, Ariana Titmus in swim, if that, she's obviously learned that because she is an even swimmer and doesn't have the ability to change pace and sprint sort of at the finish, where it looks like she is, but she's actually swimming this, similar pace to what she did on the lap on the way down. If we're talking about the 100 meters, it's not like her splits were massively faster in the second half. It's just that everybody else is fading, so it looks like you're swimming faster. And the feeling and the enjoyment factor is horrendous when you do it the other way. And that research paper that you're alluding to, the feeling when you're, as a runner, you got a piano on your back coming down the last 80 meters of an 800 or a 400 meters where the lactate's so heavy, you just hate the world. And the same as a time trialer, if you're coming home as a time trialer and you've got enough power to be, picking up places as you go, you love it. You can't wait for the next event. Whereas if you're doing the opposite and fading, you want to sell your bike. And I've said that many times to a lot of the athletes I coach. Execute well, and you won't want to sell your bike. You'll just say, "This is great fun. I enjoy it. It's good."
Yeah, absolutely. And with that in mind, I have been watching a lot of the swim events that are 200, 400 and paying attention to the first 50 compared to the second, third and fourth 50. And it's uncanny how almost every single swimmer is going through that first split 2 to 4 seconds ahead of their last 50, or especially ahead of the third 50. And they're all doing it to stay together as a group. But from everything we know, it's just a worse way to perform.
And that's so true. And it only suits one person, the person who has that style of pacing. That's that they're successful at. And so I can't imagine in every single event in the pool that everybody has that's the way that's the way they've achieved their results in the past in championship trials at their own country. They've got away with it that way. But does that mean that it's 100% right? That's where I'm questioning. If they had another tactic, would they be better swimmers? Would they get better results? Sure, they're successful because they're at the top of their game in their country and in the world. So that's the reason and logic they use behind, well, I'm pretty good at this, so I must know what I'm doing. But I'm saying, no, you could be better if you executed just like the Australians seemingly have decided to do, which I think has, we haven't been this successful for a long time, and something has changed, and I think it's the execution. And I've never heard them talk about it. They must have been listening to our podcast. Really. I've never heard them talk about it so much.